Joining me now is Dr. Andy Woods, attorney and pastor, author, seminary president, father, husband. Dr. Woods, welcome back to the broadcast. Thanks for joining us.
Brannon, good to be here. Thanks for having me.
A lot going on in the world today. One of them I talked about last night on the air is Yellen. I'm going to get to a clip of that in just a minute, but I want to go to this one here. Worldviewreport.com. Worldviewreport.com is where it's linked. So that's how I got there. If you just go to worldviewreport.com, the aggregated news site, and it'll bring you to this article right here at the top of the page, which is Federal Reserve will launch FedNow payment service in July. And there it is. This is interesting, Andy. Americans are going to have to get an account with the Federal Reserve, which none of us have now. And this is going to lead us right down the path of social credit scores. This is further laying the foundation for a digital ID, mark of the beast technology being laid. Agree?
100% agree, and 100% biblical. Since Revelation 13:16 through 18, the famous mark of the beast system anticipates a cashless economy.
Year one of the new order. This is coming from the Trilateral Commission, folks, saying that year one is the beginning. Trilateral Commission calls for 2023 year one of new order. What do you think of this? What do you think of this, Dr. Woods?
Well, I read it this morning, and of course, the key line in the whole thing is it says the speaker that they're quoting, 3 decades of globalization defined as integrated, free market-based, and deflationary has been replaced by what will be called a multi-decade period of globalization defined as fragmented, not free market-based, but industrial policy-based and structurally inflationary. This year, 2023, is year one of this new global order, close quote. So I guess what I think about it is the book of Daniel, chapter 7, verse 23, Revelation chapter 13, verse 7, Revelation chapter 17, verse 15. I mean, countless passages anticipate a time period in history where a one world government will exist on planet Earth, before Jesus comes back, which means since prophecies can't be fulfilled in a vacuum, the structure has to be laid. And so I would say that this transnational structure that sort of subverts the individual doctrine of the nation state is being, it's happening right before our eyes. There's lots of examples of it, but this is just the latest. We're now in year one of the new global order, supposedly, according to the trilateralists. And so, as Yogi Berra said, it's deja vu all over again.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you focused. I'm glad you focused on that paragraph because that's where I was going, and I'm glad you went there as well. And we haven't even talked about this as far as what we were going to discuss this. Let's show this on the screen because, folks, this tells you exactly. They're admitting now, the global elite, the power elite, the Trilateral Commission, the globalists, they're admitting what we've been telling you now for decades, and that is they're going to go to inflation. Now, we may have deflation in some areas, okay? You could have deflation in some areas and massive inflation in others. So you can have both. Assets that drop in value, but then other things that are going up in value. And it doesn't have to be even, quote, assets. It could be basics like food. Notice again what they say. They're going to a system that is not free market based. Not free market based. What do you think that is when Yellen says, what you're about to hear, we'll decide who we bail out and who we don't? We're changing the laws. That's very interesting because, again, under the 14th Amendment, there's supposed to be equal protection under the law. Congress should be making decisions here. But now she and the FDIC are going to make unilateral decisions on who they bail out, who they don't bail out. And, the Bible says the Antichrist, I don't know if you've quoted this already today, the Antichrist will show up and change the laws and the seasons, correct?
Yeah, the times and the laws.
The times and the laws. And so there you go, the times and the laws. And the times, they are a-changin', as the old saying goes. And the laws, they're just changing unilaterally, just changing them. Boom. And this isn't even the Antichrist yet. So can you imagine what's coming? So they're admitting we're not going to go to a free market-based system anymore. Not free market-based, but industrial policy-based. So, again, we could also see a civil war, because I don't know how many Americans are going to be willing to give up their private property without a fight. You know, they're collapsing the food supply. Farmers, their fertilizer and their fuel's going up. Everything's going up. So they say to us, we're having to raise our prices. But of course, we all know that, right? This is only going to increase beyond what people can imagine. And I'm reading now over in Great Britain, they're seeing a, 35% spike in inflation over in Great Britain. I'll bring that article up in a minute. This is just getting underway. And of course, we know inflation is a hidden tax to steal people's life savings and earnings. And of course, this is why they send billions of dollars to Ukraine, bail out Chinese investors in that bank in Silicon Valley Bank. And the Bidens apparently have enriched themselves with deals from China, and $3 million wired, being reported by a member of Congress. And the average American is having their money stolen from them in a hidden tax. No wonder they say by 2030 you'll own nothing and be happy, Dr. Woods.
Yeah, well, that prophecy, changing the times in the law, people will find that in the book of Daniel, chapter 7 and verse 25. If they're interested in that. And basically, it's the Antichrist coming to power, erasing the old normal and bringing in the new normal. And of course, we would argue the stage is being set for that now through events like you're talking about. But basically, what's happening, I would just call it the planned demolition of the United States economy and the orchestrated demolition of the United States Constitution. For a long time, the globalists have looked at the United States as being in the way of what they want to bring forward. You can't have a new world order as long as with American supremacy. So we have to kind of cut America down to size. And one of the ways we do it is we destroy her Constitution. We make it to the point where people don't pay attention to the Constitution anymore, which obviously Yellen is doing in her latest speech that you just talked about. And you have to get rid of the free market system, and you have to move towards this mindset where the government picks winners and losers. And of course, they call that not equality, which we're in favor of equality. They call that equity, where the government in advance determines inflation, deflation, who gets a bailout, who doesn't, who is allowed to own property, who isn't. And this is kind of this central planning economic system that the book of Revelation speaks so openly about in Revelation 13, 16 through 18. And so we see this as largely preparatory, for the 7-year tribulation period that's on the horizon.
Well, there's nothing we're talking about, and there's no problem that we're facing that the rapture won't solve, right?
That's right. Got that right. I don't have a single problem in my life that the rapture wouldn't fix. But what's interesting is the rapture is going to create a problem for the globalists, because they're going to have to explain, presumably, the mass of humanity that's missing.
Well, don't let me forget to loop back around now that you brought that up. Loop back around, because I want to put that into the context of the Pentagon spokesperson saying that these UFOs are could be probes from the mothership.
Yeah, there's going to be some odd explanation like that. The bad people got taken.
The bad people got taken.
The people like Brannon Howse that were holding up planetary evolution.
Yes, he was.
He got taken. And I think it's going to create an economic problem as far as I can tell.
Oh, yeah.
Particularly in the United States, where, the United States is unique, where you can be a Christian and you can rise to the highest level in your field. You can't do that in Saudi Arabia. You can't do that in China. So it's going to create a huge problem here in the United States as a lot of our leaders, in major areas are suddenly gone. But the chaos, as Rahm Emanuel articulated, the chaos is an opportunity to bring in greater governmental and global control. So these issues you're talking about here, coupled with the rapture, will create the chaos necessary to bring in their final phase of, the global superstructure that they're looking for.
I'm going to loop back around to the UFOs here in a minute and show that article. But first, I already got queued up. Senator Langford of Oklahoma, U.S. Senator Langford of Oklahoma, talking yesterday to Yellen. I played this on my TV show last night, but I want to make sure this audience is hearing this as well. Here, listen to this, and we'll have Dr. Woods respond.
Really free trade agreements, but are being declared free trade agreements to allow from the Inflation Reduction Act actions from Japan and Germany to now be defined as made in America. I find that very creative. Love to talk about all that. Don't have time. I need to be able to drill in on a couple of things. Let me start with some of the banking issues we're dealing with on it. Will the deposits in every community bank in Oklahoma, regardless of their size, be fully insured now? Are they fully recovered? Every bank, every community bank in Oklahoma, regardless of the size of the deposit, will they get the same treatment that SVBP just got or Signature Bank?
The bank only gets that treatment if a majority of the FDIC board, a supermajority of the Fed board, and I, in consultation with the president, determine that the failure to protect uninsured depositors would create systemic risk and significant economic and financial consequences.
So what is your plan?
We made that determination.
Right. So what is your plan to keep large depositors from moving their funds out of community banks into the big banks? We have seen the mergers of banks over the past decade. I'm concerned you're about to accelerate that by encouraging anyone who has a large deposit in a community bank to say, we're not going to make you whole, but if you go to one of our preferred banks, we will make you whole at that point.
Look, I mean, that's certainly not something that we're encouraging.
That is happening right now.
That is happening because depositors are concerned about the bank failures that have happened and whether or not other banks could also
No,
fail.
it's happening
And
because you're fully insured no matter what the amount is. If you're in a big bank, you're not fully insured if you're in a community bank.
Well, you're not fully insured. And
you were at Signature, and it just barely met that threshold. You were at Signature.
Well, we felt that there was a serious risk of contagion that could have brought down and triggered runs on many banks, and that's something, given that our judgment is that the banking system overall is safe and sound, depositors should have confidence in the system, and we took these actions.
So there's a special assessment that's been done on community banks in my state and all banks across the country. Was there any discussion that that special assessment would only apply to the larger banks, or was it always assumed the special assessment would cover every bank, including rural banks in my state?
I think I'm not certain what the rules are around that. That's for the FDIC to determine.
It has been reported publicly that SVB had a large number of Chinese investors that are there, including some that were companies directly connected to the Chinese Communist Party. Will those individuals, companies, entities, and investors that are Chinese investors be made whole based on assessments in my banks in Oklahoma? So what I'm asking is, will my banks in Oklahoma pay a special assessment to be able to make Chinese investors whole from Silicon Valley Bank?
Uninsured investors will be made whole in that bank, and I suppose that could include foreign depositors, but I don't believe there's any legal basis to discriminate among uninsured.
I get it, but I'm just saying my community banks are going to pay this additional fee. It is always fascinating to me as well, the conversation that.
All right, we'll stop it there. But there you go. Your tax dollars, folks, bailing out Communist Chinese Party members and their companies. Dr. Woods, comment, please.
Well, her answers just epitomize, everything that's wrong. I mean, with our country. I mean, she basically admitted that they're the ones that are going to determine what banks, get bailed out and which ones don't, which puts in the hands of the state the power of, picking winners, which moves us in the direction of not equality. You brought up the equal protection of the law, 14th Amendment. It moves us away from that to the concept of equity. And then there's the idea where all of a sudden American citizens, are on the hook for one of our most diabolical enemies, the Chinese Communist Party, and your average American doesn't understand why we're doing that. And then I loved what he said at the very beginning of his remarks before he started the interview. He talked about creativity. Senator Lankford did, creativity. And that's just a great word to describe what's going on. I've never seen such creativity in my life. Take, for example, the Iran deal. Take, for example, the Paris Climate Accord. Take, for example, the fact that we're about to surrender our sovereignty to the World Health Organization, or the World Hell Organization, as I call it. And you wonder why this stuff never passed through our Senate, because Article 2, Section 2 of the United States Constitution says that if you're going to have a treaty from the executive branch of government, there has to be a 2/3 approval by senators then present, a supermajority. Well, how are all of these things passing without that requirement being satisfied? The answer is creativity. We just don't call them treaties anymore. We'll just call them executive agreements. And so all of these things that we're talking about, are part of the planned demolition of the United States of America, and they're clearly paving the road into the global order, or the New World Order.
Yep. And we're headed to war. We have many, many people warning we're probably going to be at war by the end of this year, if not before, or early next year. And I had this on my website, this just right before we went on the air. I posted this. Arrest warrant issued for Vladimir Putin by International Criminal Court over Ukraine war. And some may say, well, good. I'm no fan of Putin, so I'm not sitting here defending him, that's for sure. But what I am saying is, it seems as though the globalists are doing everything they can to put him in a corner and make him strike out. And this seems to just add it to that list. Nobody seems here trying to de-escalate. It seems as though they're absolutely trying to escalate this thing. What say you?
Well, that International Criminal Court in general, I've argued for a long time that that's going to be the legal arm, of the New World Order. And what you're dealing with is a rogue court that has jurisdiction over the whole earth. And what people need to understand is that the basic protections that we have built into our system via the Bill of Rights, like protection against double jeopardy, being tried twice for the same offense, the burden of proof on the prosecution, a right to a jury trial of your peers, a right to a speedy trial. All of these things that we take for granted in the United States are totally and 100% absent in the International Criminal Court. And so Americans need to think twice concerning whether they want a court like that to be doing things like they're doing to Putin, or anybody else for that matter. Because if they can stretch out their arms here, they can eventually stretch their arms out against any ordinary American, and none of our rights are protected at that point.
They could put out an arrest warrant for you and me for the things we've said about Islam and other things, and call for our being arrested and taken to The Hague, right?
Sure, and then you just sit there and rot. Well, wait a minute. What about a speedy trial? Oh, well, that may apply in your system, but we're an international system. Bill of Rights has no application here. There's a parallel, Brandon, with the J6 protesters. This is exactly what they're going through, as some of them are still, you can believe it, rotting away in incarceration. The Bill of Rights does not apply to the Patriot Act, which is the sort of the structure that they're using to persecute these people. And think of something like this happening on a worldwide scale. That's the International Criminal Court in a nutshell.
This is why they need these containment camps. I really believe this is probably one of the reasons, not maybe the only reason, but one of the reasons they need these containment camps. They plan on bringing charges against all kinds of Christians. You know, the funny thing is, we may be raptured and they don't get their chance.
Well, that would be the ideal scenario. That's what I would want. But
that doesn't mean those won't be used for the tribulation saints.
Absolutely. And the truth of the matter is there's all sorts of things being done now. I think you guys covered it. I was listening to you and Alex Newman. I'm not sure if that was last night. You had that
last
show,
night. Last night, yep.
Yeah, we were listening to it on we do a call-in show ourselves in downtown Houston. So we were listening to it, Pastor Jim and myself driving in. But you guys were talking about mental health and how they're using the subject of mental health to create really a category of criminals, a category of people that are mentally off, that kind of need to be separated from the rest of society. And maybe that's what these internment camps that you're speaking of, that's the role they're going to play.
Let's go to this article. I'm going to speed things up here. No callers today. Poland to send 4 fighter jets to Ukraine in coming days. Again, they're escalating this thing. They're not de-escalating it. And don't be shocked when the Biden regime sends some as well. All right, here we go. Russia will use a Poseidon underwater missile. These are all linked at worldviewreport.com. Russia will use a Poseidon underwater missile to wipe Britain off the map with a 1,000-foot high radioactive tsunami in NATO, and if NATO troops put boots on the ground in Ukraine. Now, I have that whole story in my 2019 documentary, Siege. A whole segment. I show you the Poseidon. Dr. Pry talks about it from the news desk here. In 2019, he and my documentary there was warning about the Poseidon. So there you go. That just shows you now what the other side's doing. Let's go quickly here. Another article at worldviewreport.com. UN teachers called to murder Jews, new report reveals. Talked about that last night with Alex Newman on the United Nations, its founding and how crooked and corrupt it is, which will soon, hopefully not, but they're hoping to dominate and be running our country through the World Health Organization and stripping us of our sovereignty. Which again means we could be invaded by the yellow helmets that are notorious for raping women and children. And of course, the UN has now got a curriculum, according to this report, where they're teaching and glorifying terrorism and encouraging martyrdom, demonize Israelis, and cite anti-Semitism.
And this is what the UN is funding by way of worldwide education. It deals with a Syria employee. I'm not going to try to pronounce that name, but this person celebrated Adolf Hitler when she shared a photograph of Hitler, calling on him to wake up because, quote, there are still some people you need to burn, close quote. It's just astounding. There's the quote right there. Yeah, it's just astounding to me that, here the United States apparently is contributing to this. This is being funded worldwide via the UN. But on the other end of the stick, it's not surprising because the prophet Zechariah in chapter 12, verse 3 and chapter 14, verses 2 and 3 predicted the worldwide hatred of the nation of Israel in the last days. And you're seeing the outworking of that prophecy here in this, global anti-Semitic, propaganda being funded by U.S. and UN dollars.
I'll bless those who bless you. I'll curse those who curse you. And here we are funding this.
Unreal.
Yeah. Here's another one over at worldviewreport.com. Power grid. This is a brand new article. I know I reported on something like this a week or two ago. Worldviewreport.com. I have this article linked. American Military News. Power grid attacks surge 71% in 2 years, likely to keep rising. North American Electric Reliability Corporation has released a report documenting a 71% increase in American power grid attacks since 2021, and they believe the attacks will only increase. There you go. Here's another one I want to get to before we run out of time. Iranian terror drones coming soon to a theater near you. U.S. and Europe need to get far more serious about stopping Tehran before far more serious attacks occur. Talking about sending these drones, near you, as corrupt as we know that Mexico is, and the drug cartels and all this going on, it would be nothing for Iran to be in Mexico and sending drones over the border with serious, serious, deadly consequences on those drones. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would completely agree. And again, we're talking about Bible prophecy here on this show a lot. That's the outworking of what Ezekiel said would happen in the last days. There'd be an invasion from Persia or Iran into the land of Israel. When Ezekiel had that vision 2,600 years ago, Persia was the good guy. It was the Persians that were going to help Israel out of the captivity. And the Persians, have always been an ally of Israel, but Ezekiel's prophecy said Iran would turn. And that clearly started to happen with the deposing of the Shah and replacing him with the Ayatollah. And now you have a Shiite Islamic theocracy in charge. And they're very close to getting nukes. They're very close to crossing the nuclear finish line. And look at all these things they're doing with drones. And so this is an outworking of Ezekiel's prophecy.
And then we have this headline from Fox News. Pentagon officials suggest alien mothership in our solar system could send mini probes to Earth. New research paper in draft form comes from Pentagon's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. So here we have the Pentagon stating that, hey, there's a paper that's been written, and maybe these are really UFOs are really coming from the mothership. Again, how do you think, as a pastor, how do you think this helps set the stage for the deception coming? Ron Carlson included his book from 1994, Fast Facts and False Teaching, that don't be shocked if the Antichrist steps off of a UFO.
Wow. Well, it's evolutionary.
Exactly.
The idea is life began without God accidentally here. And so maybe it could happen elsewhere. It could happen here. It could happen elsewhere. And maybe those folks way out yonder are more evolved than us, and they're kind of helping us evolve. Really what they are, Satan masquerades as an angel of light. They're basically demons pretending to be ascended masters, deceiving the human race, pushing us into the global spirituality.
Indeed.